Guys, it has been almost exactly a year since I last talked about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and I think it's finally time to give my full thoughts on part 3.
Very nice, Shiza-chan!
Today, I'm going to be taking you to 1988 or 89, depending on some sources, where we meet Jotaro Kujo, 6'5", built like a Mack truck, you know, your average 17-year-old, as he embarks to Egypt on a truly bizarre adventure. But first, walk like an Egyptian.
Manga, animator, anything, alright, let's do this. Weekly is the basis, worst generation. Cooking up a feast while he's turning through the pages. Theories that he's making, from shonen to seinen. Blocked in, analyzing, using observation. Yeah, observation. Rambling addiction.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Rambling Addiction, the series where I talk and you listen. Tonight, as I said in the introduction, we're going to be talking about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Part 3, Stardust Crusaders. Now, after my last JoJo's video, when I binge read and binge watched all of parts 1 and 2, I took a little bit of a break from JoJo's. And then just a few weeks ago, I finished all of part 3, which I had started right after I finished part 2, and watched the anime. And I have to say, I did enjoy it quite a bit. Especially the concepts of stands. Now, as I go through this and I talk about the series as a whole, I will be mentioning stands that I liked and didn't like from each kind of like segment of the story, because it's not really broken up into arcs like a general anime. Each JoJo arc is literally like 2 episodes or like 5 to 6 chapters in the manga, or 8 to 10 chapters depending on who the villain is. So let's get right into the story. Our good man, Joseph Joestar, is back now in his 60s to visit his daughter and grandson. That is right, he did end up staying with Suzy Q and parenting at least one child for now. He brings along with him Muhammad Abdul, a mystical man who is a fortune teller, and they find Jotaro in a prison cell. He has put himself there because he is, as he puts it, possessed by a ghost, and he is willing to go to extreme lengths to prove that. But yes, this is of course the stand power system that I have already alluded to a little bit. Hammond is done. It is so last century. Get out of here, all you Zeppelis, because for some reason you weren't in this part at all. I'm not bitter about this at all. It's not like I love both Zeppeli men that we have gotten so far. Anyway, I digress. I've gotten off track. So it turns out that Joseph has developed his own stand in Hermit Purple. It allows him some like precognitive abilities, like he can control TV screens and images and kind of tell the future or tell something about someone. It's a pretty interesting power that we do get a good showing of later in the part. And of course, Abdul has one of the cooler stands in the series, Magician's Red, which allows him to like control fire and stuff like that and do all kinds of cool, sweet physical fire attacks. But it is nothing compared to Jotaro's Star Platinum, which I like a lot, and I have a theory about actually. See, I am not through with all of JoJo's yet. I am only on part 4 as of making this video. I'm about done with part 4, actually, at least reading. I still have to watch the anime. Anyway, but I have this theory that that is the spirit of Joseph coming back to help his great-great-grandson, great-great-great-grandson? Either way, fight off Dio, the evil that he himself took out the first time. But if that is not the case, or that is the case, don't tell me. I don't want spoilers. I'm really enjoying JoJo so far. So they inform Jotaro of Dio, and even though he's kind of hesitant to join the fight, he ends up doing so after fighting a school friend of his named Kakouin, who was infected by one of Dio's plant little buds that he puts inside people's head. Luckily though, Jotaro does remove that, and Kakouin sees the error of his ways and joins the crew as the first Jobro of the series. But in a plot twist, Jotaro's mother falls ill as she starts to develop a stand and her body cannot handle it. The only thing to do is go to Egypt and stop Dio while stopping his army of stand users along the way. So this is the basic setup of the story, and from here we get a Monster of the Week style adventure with the Stardust Crusaders fighting a different stand user every like 2 episodes. And I'm not gonna lie, this first part, when they first leave for Egypt, pretty rough on them, right? They get into a plane crash because of, I believe it's like the Tower of Grey stand. It's like this beetle and it takes out people's tongues and stuff. It's pretty gruesome actually. But this is like, I don't know how many times that Joseph has been in a plane crash. But that leads to meeting the greatest character of this part, and that is Jean-Pierre Polnareff, the great Frenchman who has the silver chariot stand. He is my goat of all goats, and I love him. I love him so much. Like, out of all of the characters introduced to this part, even the JoJo of this part, Jotaro, Polnareff is the one that is going to stick with me forever. But more on my Jotaro problems later. They also have this like weird encounter with the stand user on a boat. I'm not going to talk about every single stand because there's just so many of them, and not all of them impressed me or had a lasting effect on me, if I'm honest. But yes, they do get into a fight on a boat. This guy that has like a fish stand. But right after that, I just remember they run a fade with a monkey, and he's got a really cool stand actually. Like, he makes a whole ship. That's his stand. Like, he just takes a ship, right? Like just a base ship, and then makes like an elegant cruise liner out of it. Oh my gosh. I just can't believe. Actually, what am I saying? Yes, I can. Araki, I know you by now. Yes, I can. I can believe you made Jotaro fight a monkey. They didn't get to Singapore though. And this is where things start getting really interesting for me. And it is because of two stands. One is the devil, the one that Polnareff fights in his hotel room. It's like this little tiki man. It reminds me of that, there's this obscure 80s movie. I'm struggling to remember the name. I'm gonna find a clip and throw it in, but there's this like little tiki doll that's evil. Lucas, you know what you're talking about. Throw it in. But that's what it reminds me of. That thing scared the heck out of me when I was a kid. So this thing scared the heck out of me as an adult. I was sitting there like, this is making me feel uneasy, and I don't know why. But then I remembered that thing and I was like, oh. Rambling aside, the second one is Yellow Temperance. This was the first stand that I was like, okay, what are they gonna do against this thing? I was watching with the homie vexyz the Lurking Legend. He kept saying, think about this, every stand has a weakness. So every fight I'd be sitting there thinking, what are they gonna do? How are they gonna beat this stand exactly? And with Yellow Temperance, I could not think of a single way to like take this guy out. I was like, or was it a girl? Wasn't it? I can't remember, they shifted their form so many times. No, it was a dude. It was a dude. It ended up being a dude. But yeah, and not gonna lie, brutal stand user. What he did to that dog in front of that little boy was crazy. If I decided to show that on screen during the editing process, I apologize now. Yeah, but the fights were really good between these two stands, and I really liked when Yellow Temperance was as Kakyoin, and I finally got to see the lick 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 meme. Like that just, and then that's just the behavior that Yellow Temperance was copying from Kakyoin. Like, just chef's kiss, Araki. That is a brilliant. So we didn't move on to Calcutta, and we meet Whole Horse, and then the Hangman. I cannot remember the stand user's name, but I remember his stand was the Hangman, and he's the man who took out Polnareff's sister and did ungodly acts upon her as well. And it is here that because Polnareff cannot control his anger, he goes after the Hangman after an encounter in a bathroom with a very weird toilet. And during this pursuit of rage, Avdol follows him. Polnareff begins a fight with Whole Horse and his stand, the Emperor, as he tries to learn the whereabouts of the Hangman, not knowing that Whole Horse and the Hangman stand user are in cahoots. And it is in this combat that Avdol tragically loses his life.
I'm so sick of it.
This was a big hit for me. I really love Mohammed Avdol as a character. He's not my favorite Jobro from this part, but he was still a solid Jobro. Also, I just realized that JoJo's Bizarre Adventure has its own lingo. Let me get back on track. Yes, so Avdol does pass away here. We'll talk about that in a bit. And Polnareff goes to enact his revenge, which he does finally get. And I love the moment with him and Kakyoin when Polnareff does get his revenge against the Hangman. And Kakyoin's like, no, when you get your revenge, you'll want to say something like this.
I will have you pay with your life.
And it is so good. But this does lead me to my first problem with part 3, and that is the monster of the week problem. As we get closer to Egypt and across like Singapore and everything and Calcutta, we just got so many weak stands, like in my opinion, and I don't mean weak power wise, I mean weak as like impact wise. Like I don't care about the car stand at all. I don't care about the sun stand at all. I don't care about Anubis at all. And I know that's in Egypt, but like I don't. And it's a cool concept, the Anubis one is at least, but like, and I think Araki was trying to set up a newer power system on top of the one he had already built in part 1 and 2 with Hamon. And to do that, he kind of threw a bunch of them out there, because as I'm reading part 4, and I'll talk about this more in depth in that review, it seems that he's pacing himself better with the stand users. Whereas by the time I was as far into part 3 as I am right now into part 4, I've only met maybe 10 stand users. Whereas when I was at that point in part 3, chapter count wise, I had met like 30. And I think it was because he was trying to have fun with it and then also show the audience the extent of the power system that is stands. But just to get us kind of back on track, after Abdul, that is when I did notice a problem with some of the stands. Like I said, the car one happens right after that. I wasn't too impressed with the Empress's power, but we did then get our encounter with Inya the Hag, who was coming to take out Ponarif for doing what he did to her son.
What are you doing?
Getting my vengeance!
But I did love Justice as a stand, something, you know, it's basically tangible fog that can get inside your wounds and puppeteer you, which is just, that's such a cool concept for a power.
Behold the terrifying power of justice, my stand!
But around this part is when we go to an island and find out that Abdul is actually alive.
Mohammed Abdul! Yes, I am!
I tried to express how sad I actually was when Abdul did initially pass in the part, but this just felt so cheap to me. I'm going to be honest. But yeah, Joseph is basically just like, yeah, we got him away and got him healed and he's fine now. What? So this is my problem with it though. It feels like a betrayal to Polnareff. Like them not telling that only fueled the fire of revenge that he had that almost got him and Kakyoin taken out. Now they did, you know, win that battle, luckily, but it could have gone worse. And all that did by not telling him that Abdul was still alive is fuel it, right? That's my problem with it. Anyway, I'm gonna get off of that. We have basically made it up to the point where they would be in the story at Egypt. And before I go into Egypt, I am going to talk about some of the stands from that first part that I did not talk about just yet. Like I said, I was a huge fan of Justice with the myth concept. Another one is Death 13. So I believe they were going from Calcutta to the island that Abdul's dad was at. Don't get me started on that again, I just talked about it. And they took a baby with them that had fangs. How did they not notice the baby had fangs, by the way? Like that was the... Anyway. Death 13 is that baby stand, and it pulls people into a dreamlike world where it can affect their living bodies, and you cannot pull your stand into the dreamlike world. It was a really cool like bit in the series because Kakyoin kind of like starts going crazy, and he's like, no one will believe me. Why am I going crazy? Why do I want to hurt the baby? And
I really don't care that you're a baby. I'll snap your neck like a twig.
It was just really well done. I really enjoyed the segment with Death 13. Another one is the High Priestess when they are on their sub about to touch down in Egypt. Just the idea of this shape-shifting stand is insane to me. It can enter any material and it's real small in its natural state. And then it becomes, you know, the whole bottom of the ocean. Yeah, it was just such a cool concept, and seeing them inside its mouth and like trying to escape. I really enjoyed that imagery. I don't know why. Am I into vor? Question for another time. A big one that I did brush over, and there's a reason why, is Oingo Boingo. I really like this combo. The comic book style predictions is pretty neat. I don't think I've seen anything like that in a manga before. It does remind me of a ability in Hunter x Hunter that predicts the future, but it is it's different enough from that for me to call it unique. I don't know. I just really liked the comic book prediction system like that. That was such an interesting concept to me, even though it predicted, you know, his brother's downfall and Whole Horse's downfall, which good. I do not like Whole Horse. As we make it to Egypt, we do get introduced to Iggy. Now, Iggy is a dog stand user, and I love him.
And he's crazy about ripping chunks of hair out of people's heads.
It's just, we'd already seen the orangutan stand user, so I knew animals could be, But then when Iggy showed up and we get to see like his internal monologue and stuff like that, it just, there's something about it. Like, what a goat and what a good boy. Before I get to the final beats of the story as the Stardust Crusaders go to find Dio in Egypt, I have to talk about one last problem, and that is the forgettable nature of some of the stands after a certain point. When I was sitting down and getting the notes ready for this review or this discussion, whatever you want to call it, I, as always, started writing out my thoughts and then going beside the wiki so that I had a reference to make sure I was talking about things correctly and in the right order. And as I got to Iggy's introduction and the defeat of the High Priestess, I realized that after that point, when we got really into Egypt, there weren't as many memorable stands as there were at the beginning of the series. And like I said, I think it comes down to that point. Like, once that car stand is introduced, that's when I think some of the stands start to go downhill. Not to say there aren't good stands introduced, but that's the point where I see a lot more forgettable stands coming up. Like the battle with the first Darby, right? He's a gambler. His stand allows him to take your soul and put it into a poker chip. I love that power. That is such an interesting concept, and it's all a game of chance unless he can cheat without you catching on to it. But it's sandwiched between that stand that makes people into kids and a really weird whole horse boingo team up that I don't know why was there. But yes, let's get into the final parts of part 3, shall we? First thing I want to talk about is Iggy versus Pet Shop. Pet Shop is the bird that adorns Dio's shoulder, and it also has a stand. It is because of this battle with Pet Shop, which is fierce. I mean, Iggy takes on the bird, traps himself underwater for a little bit, and like builds like this dome around him so he can breathe. But more importantly than anything, he finds Dio's hideout and allows the JoBro crew to join them. And as Iggy brings the Stardust Crusaders into the castle, that is where we meet Darby II, the younger Darby brother. Darby the player, as it is.
You may call me Darby. Darby, huh?
He pulls Jotaro and Joseph into a basement area which is projected to be like its own little area. It almost looks like its own like island or like landmass, if I'm being honest. And there is set up a console as Jotaro and Joseph play a game with him.
Have you ever played a video game in your life?
This fight was pretty tense for what it was. I mean, they're just playing video games, but I like the teamwork between Jotaro and Joseph here, where Joseph is using Hermit Purple to cheat for Jotaro because Darby is trying to predict what Jotaro is going to do, not realizing that he's actually playing against Joseph. No. And it's such a Joseph tactic. So the fact that him and Jotaro thought of this together, like as grandfather and grandson, I loved it so much. While the Joestar men are having some fun with some video games, to save Kakaween's soul, Abdul, Iggy, and Polnareff are taking on the deadly Vanilla Ice and his stand, Cream.
All right, stop.
And guys, they did it to me good. If I had a nickel for every time Araki killed Abdul in this part, I'd have 2 nickels.
Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right?
Seriously though, it happened so quickly. So the battle with Vanilla Ice and his stand begins, and he can like take out parts of space-time as he moves around the room in this like invisible force field thing. I don't know, some of the stand's powers are weird and high conceptual, or maybe I'm just bad at explaining them. And like Abdul's like, Polnareff, there's a stand user, and then he's just gone. But Iggy, man, once again, this is why I kept saying Iggy's the GOAT as well, not only with his battle in Pet Shop where he showed his worth and brought the Stardust Crusaders to the mansion, but he saves Polnareff's life. It is only because of Iggy that Polnareff was able to make it out of this fight alive.
Damn it, Fleabag! Why'd you have to be so stubborn?
Good boy, Iggy. Good boy. Fittingly enough, right after this moment of extreme loss, we do get a comforting moment of Susie Q and her daughter Holly, and I really enjoyed this. And we even get to see her talking to Joseph on the phone and be like, putting my grandson on and stuff like that. And it's wholesome, I'm not gonna lie, and it made me feel better after all that. But yes, the battle with Dio begins. We get the iconic moment with Jotaro and him.
Dio!
But a lot happens in this battle. We learn of Dio's stand, the world which is the similar type to Star Platinum. Once again, more fuel to the fire that I think Joseph's ghost is Star Platinum, because his body could also produce the world, and that's why they're similar stands and they can both stop time. That's the thing though, yes, Dio's stand can stop time for, I believe it's 4 seconds, 5 seconds, something like that, but just enough time to really mess things up. But it is during trying to figure out what his stand does and trying to figure out this mechanic of time stopping that while Dio is trying to drain Joseph's blood to gain full control over Jonathan's body, Kakyoin falls in combat, learning what the world's power truly is. And he makes this ultimate sacrifice to make sure that his friends can live. And oh my god, Araki, you took out 3 Joe Bros in like the span of 4 episodes. Why would you do this to me? While Kakyoin does achieve his final goal, it is not enough to stop Dio from absorbing Joseph. But luckily, our hero Jotaro does prevail, as his stand, as I said earlier, also possesses to stop time, but only for about 1 second. But that 1 second proves enough, as he finally does defeat Dio. But yes, Polnareff parts ways with our Joestars as they go back to Japan to be with Jotaro's mother Holly and Suzy Q, as our story comes to an end. So let's get into final thoughts. Overall, I think that this part suffers a little bit from enemy inflation. There's just so many of them thrown at you. Like I said, every 2 episodes you get a new one. And it's 2 seasons. I think it's 48 episodes, maybe a little bit more of that. So let's see, 48, that's 24 mini arcs back to back to back. And it is a lot to take in. That said, I do think Araki did a good job at expanding the power system and setting it up for later parts. As I said earlier in the video, I am pretty deep into part 4, and it seems like he has already fixed that problem. And weirdly enough, a problem that I had in my part 1 and 2 review was that I felt like the cast of side characters weren't that impactful in part 1, and they got a little bit better in part 2, but some still fell flat. While in part 3, I love the cast of side characters. I had no problem remembering any of them, whereas in part 1, a lot of the side characters were forgettable. So it seems like with every part, Araki is getting better. That said, my main problem with part 3 is Jotaro, and only because of what I've seen in part 4. So Jotaro in part 3 is very stoic, even though they do a good job of conveying exactly how he feels and his morality as a person. That said, I did find him falling a little flat at times, especially while Joseph, who is my favorite JoJo, was still there kind of overshadowing him for me. Even in his old man form, I still preferred watching Joseph on screen over Jotaro for a lot of the part, or reading about Joseph than Jotaro. That said, by the end of the series, I did have a deeper love for Jotaro, and I will say I put him above Jonathan in my tier list of JoJo's, but not above Joseph, which my audience kind of agrees with, as I ran a poll asking who their first favorite JoJo was out of the first 3, and Joseph was the winner. But I digress. It is because in part 4, we get a much more expressive Jotaro, and I love him in part 4, but I think maybe, just maybe, I love him so much in part 4 because of the groundwork Araki laid for him throughout part 3, and seeing him in his later childhood as he's becoming an adult, and now seeing him as an adult and fully actualized. But yes, I'm not here to talk completely about part 4. That will be the next time I talk about JoJo's, which hopefully isn't another year from now. I don't believe it will be. But as always, I want to know what you think. What's your favorite stand from part 3? Who's your favorite character? I want to know all of your opinions in the comments below. And if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe if you liked the video. I'm trying to get to 500 subscribers right now, and we are over halfway there, so let's make it happen. But yes, as always, I've been StrawHatLucas, and more important than anything I've said tonight, I want you to have a wonderful, wonderful night.